Okay, I'm on page 225. Now we're talking about 3 to 6 year olds, chapter 7, 8, and 9. Chapter 7 talks about their physical development. And remember we were talking about those little kids play a lot? Well, 3 to 6 year olds just keep it up. They're very imaginative. They're full of fantasy and pretend, and they love to pretend things. So I thought one time, then if these little kids like to pretend, why don't I just play some pretend with them? And any idea what happens when an adult suggests that let's pretend? They think it's a cool idea. And you're kind of encouraging it. It's like, okay, there's nothing wrong with this. Because sometimes some adults go, don't be saying stuff like that. That's not really true. And we're just pretending. We're just having some fun. Their vocabulary soars. They go from about 200 words at the age of 2 to by the time they get to 6, they'll know about 10,000 words. I don't know who's counting them, but that's what all the books seem to say out there. So, on page 225, what should you do if you're working with a 3 to 6 year old and you suspect that they're not receiving proper care and attention? What should you do?
Give it to them or lead them to someone who will.
Find out what you can do to help. Do what you can to help them. If you're a teacher or in some employed capacity where you're working with children, the law says you're supposed to call the Family Services Department. And probably before you do that, it wouldn't hurt to check into the situation to see what's going on. One time, a little boy I know went to school and he decided he got punished for doing something. He got punished by his father for throwing rocks at the neighbor's house and breaking a window. And so he went to school and his father gave him a paddling. And he went to school and told the teacher, my dad hit me with a stick over the weekend. Teacher called Family Services. A social worker came out to the house to check and said to the father, so did you hit him with a stick? He goes, I guess you could say that. I'm a painter and I have these paint stirring sticks and I paddled him with it for throwing rocks at the neighbor's house and breaking a window. And this social worker looked at him and said, did you tell your teacher that's why you got paddled? He goes, no. And she goes, well, you've created a lot of hassle for a lot of people. Thank you, young man. You should be thankful you have a father who cares. And I guess he was just trying to get his dad in trouble. And he realized he got himself in trouble. So don't be afraid to call Family Services. I know we all hear stories about Family Services sometimes taking away children from homes that they shouldn't. But if there's a question about a child's welfare, there's a whole lot of people at Family Services who are watching out for the welfare of children, and they can pretty well tell when somebody's doing the right thing. During early childhood, they grow about 2 to 3 inches a year, gain 5 to 6 pounds. So what do the parents of 3 to 6 year olds complain about? I buy them some new clothes and what happens? They outgrow them. You should be thankful for that. Yeah, but I just bought these clothes. Well, find some friends at church whose little kids are younger than yours and then pass those clothes on to them and say, here, my child just outgrew this and it isn't even worn out yet. And then start looking for ways to find some clothes for your child that you don't have to spend so much money on since they're growing so fast. Gotcha, Uriah. Right. And where's a good place to find clothes without spending a lot of money on if you know your kids are going to outgrow them? The thrift store. If you haven't been there, check it out. It's a wonderful place to save money, so you can spend it on Black Friday sales. Okay. So if they're growing so fast, guess what? Page 228, children need proper nutrition to fuel the rapid growth. So watch what I found here. See if we can turn this on. A sample meal plan for preschoolers. What should you feed preschoolers? Now, I like the way this starts out here. Preschoolers need 2 or 3 snacks during the day to meet their nutritional requirements. So, what happens to the rule that we only eat at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and there's no snacking in between? 3 to 6-year-olds need snacks in between because they're growing so fast. And what do they need? Fruits, vegetables, whole grains, dairy foods, all make for healthy snacks. String cheese, pretzel sticks and raisins, carrot sticks to dip in yogurt. Have you found any yogurt that tastes as good as ice cream? Have you found it? Well, I have. I love ice cream, but it's not good for me. So I said, what's my best substitute for ice cream? Yogurt. It's like yogurt doesn't taste like ice cream. I found some. It's called Yoplait. Have you tasted it? My wife gave me some last night. She gets ready to go to bed. She goes, so do you want anything, Tom? And what I really want is a bowl of ice cream. I just, years ago, started eating a bowl of ice cream at night before I went to bed, and it was so much fun. And then I realized how it wasn't healthy, so I said, let's find something else. I said, bring me some yogurt. And I'm in there eating this little container of Yoplait yogurt that has extra fruit in it. And I don't really care whether she brings me strawberry or peach. I just start eating it. I said, oh, Nida, this is just like a bowl of ice cream. Now, I know that my taste have changed a little bit because I've been doing this a while. But what I'm telling you is you can change people's appetites for things. Because I don't crave a bowl of ice cream. That yogurt is healthier and it tastes just as good. In fact, knowing that it's so much better for me, it even in my mind tastes better to eat that yogurt instead of ice cream. And I don't know if you know this or not, but a few years ago, when they decided to make the cafeteria program at schools healthier, they threw out all of the foods that they had been feeding kids and started putting this kind of stuff on the menu. And the people in the cafeteria were saying, what a tragedy. The kids get their tray of food and then they just go dump it in the trash. They don't even eat it. And it's because they had developed an appetite, a craving for stuff that wasn't good for them. And I'm thinking, that's not so bad. You go, what? Yeah, okay, so what does that mean? They're not eating lunch. So what's the downside of not eating lunch? You'll get hungry?
They're not growing.
Okay, these little kids aren't going to keep growing. Well, their growth could be stunted, but if you don't eat because you don't like what's on the table, you'll get hungry. And I'm thinking if you let it go long enough, they'll get hungry enough to where they'll eat the stuff they don't like. And in the process of waiting, going through withdrawal from all the stuff they like that's been putting extra pounds on them, because all the literature out there says our society is overweight, then they'll start burning up some of the calories that they've stored because their body is still growing and it needs some nutrition. So maybe it's not the end of the world when they start throwing that stuff away. And then what happens is after we make this transition and they finally say, well, if that's all they're going to put here and I'm hungry, I guess I'll eat it. then it's like, well, that's not as bad as I thought it was. And even if they don't like it at first, they can start to develop an appetite for it because you just put it on their plate. I'm thinking the one thing my little 3 to 6 year olds didn't like, I don't know why, they didn't like beets. Do any of you not like beets? I would tell my wife to buy them in the cans where they're cut in little cubes. Anyone ever see those? And the reason I had her buy them that way is I happen to like beets, and I didn't grow up with them, I just like them. So I would tell her to put some beets on the girls' plates, and then if there were 12 of those little squares of beets on their plate, and they would say, ew, I don't like beets. And I'd say, oh good, more for me. And I would say, I'll take 6 of yours, then I can have some more beets. And then I'd just eat that stuff and say, I just love these beets. And you have to eat 6 of them whether you like them or not. But you understand, it's like they eventually, they did, I don't know if they ever liked them, but they said, I'll just eat my beets. And just realized sometimes we just have to help kids eat healthy. I looked at a couple of menus here. The one thing I would pass on this is that hummus. So anybody here like hummus? 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm glid you guys enjoy it.
Is it pronounced hummus or hummus?
Hummus? I don't know what it is. It just doesn't taste good to me, and I don't like it. So I'm glad you do. Let's see. Let's try this one. See what it looks like. A sample menu for preschoolers. Breakfast. Low-fat milk. No. I want whole milk. That low-fat stuff tastes like chalk water. Okay, a half a cup of cereal. Have you ever seen what a half a cup of cereal looks like?
It's not bad at all.
Get a measuring cup, a half a cup. I tell my wife, I say, Nina, get this little plastic measuring cups, and when you make me some Raisin Bran, just get the half a cup one and scoop it out, and that's all I get. Oh, I'm still hungry. That's okay. Still, just try some of this stuff and see what happens. And it's like, yeah, well, but I had some Raisin Bran. That's what I wanted. So I satisfied my craving, and I put whole milk on it. And 4 to 6 ounces or a half a cup of cantaloupe or strawberries or bananas. Well, I can't afford the strawberries, and the cantaloupe isn't in season, so guess what? And bananas are cheaper than the rest of them, aren't they? So go ahead and buy some bananas. For a snack, I'm going to drink whole milk again. No, you know what? If I had whole milk for breakfast, I'll just skip the milk for my snack and just have a half a cup of fruit. Oh, do any of you ever see those little fruit cups you buy that are just about that size? Watch for them on sale and then load up on them and then say, that's a good way to help learn to eat healthy, is have those little half cup portions laying around. And a half a cup of yogurt. Do all of you like yogurt? If you don't like yogurt, here's what I've told classes in the past. If you tasted yogurt and didn't like it, then try a different kind. And just keep trying yogurt till you find one that you enjoy the taste of, and then that's the one you'll buy. Because you can find one out there. Now, granted, okay, Anderson Erickson AE yogurt, the one they put on sale for 29 cents. The reason they put it on sale for 29 cents is it doesn't taste good, that's why. I mean, that's my opinion. So what that means is, I have to, excuse me, I have to buy the more expensive yogurt because I know it's healthy and I'm going to eat it, but I have to buy the more expensive stuff because I can't stand the 29 cent stuff. But, you ready for this? Eating healthy, being healthy, feeding a 3 to 6 year old a healthy diet is going to cost some money. So we might as well recognize that being healthy is going to cost us something. A sandwich with 2 slices of whole wheat bread. You don't like whole wheat bread? Then find one. My wife's favorite bread is Health Nut. Have any of you ever tasted it? At the grocery store, the 2 grocery stores, Price Chopper and Hy-Vee, where I shop, they want about $4 a loaf for Health Nut bread. But Walmart sells it for $2.95 or $2.85 sometimes. So I just, when she's out of bread, that's when I go to Walmart, and that's where I buy my packages of Yoplait yogurt in big containers, where it costs me about 50 cents a container instead of 60. So you look for ways to save some money, but find a healthy bread, and again, you'll pay more for it than you will just that white stuff, but that plain white bread, but it's better for you. And then some cheese, veggies, and dressing. If you're not much for eating vegetables, have you ever tasted, how many of you like celery? Okay, and then if you really don't care for it, how do you dress it up? Put peanut butter on it? You ever do that? Or put cheese on it? I mean, there are ways to take some vegetables and dress them up. 1/4 of a cup of dark yellow or dark green vegetables. Eat your vegetables. Peanut butter. All right. Now there you go. Thank you to Mr. Booker T. Is that his name? Booker T. Washington?
George Washington.
George Washington Carver. Yeah, George Washington Carver. He grew up in southern Missouri. Well, that's where he was born, in southern Missouri. And he's famous for doing what? Finding all these things you can do with peanuts and introducing the world to peanut butter. But you want to know what he was trying to do? He was trying to create ways for people who were sharecroppers living on poor land in the South to make a living, and he discovered that peanuts were the way to go. And he looked at all these things you can do with peanuts, and he was a brilliant scientist. And you might as well know this part of his story. And they've got a little monument to him down in southern Missouri, but the truth is, when he went to school in southern Missouri, the schools for guys like George Washington Carver weren't very good schools. So he went to live with some relatives over in Kansas, where he could get a better education, where they were offering better schools. And then he eventually went to college up in Iowa, I think. Up in Iowa. And the people in Iowa said he was so smart, they offered him a job as a professor at their college. And he said, sorry, but I need to go to, I think it was, what was the university where he went to work? Does anyone know? Was it Tuskegee? Where he went down there to teach black students how to become good farmers in, I think it was Alabama. Spent his life down there, just doing all kinds of things with peanuts. Well, enough of that, but peanut butter. Every time I eat some, I say, thank you, Mr. Carver, for coming up with all these ideas. And if you don't like canned vegetables, then spend a little more money and buy some frozen ones. And if you don't like them by themselves, then put some cheese on them or something, or sauce on them to dress them up. For snack, some more peanut butter and a slice of bread. For dinner, 2 ounces of meat. Have you ever been to Price Chopper when they're selling those steaks and baked potatoes for $7? You know how much that steak is they're selling? That big old Kansas City strip steak? It's about 7 or 8 ounces. So I'm going to feed this little 3 to 6-year-old. Let's see, I'm going to cut that 8-ounce steak into 4 pieces. And we're each going to get a tiny little piece of steak. Now do you see why people in America are overweight? because we eat such large portions. Well, any idea what to do to make that steak go further? What to do? I mean, I grew up on a farm where we raised cattle, so we ate meat all the time, and raised chickens, so we had meat to eat all the time. So I said to my wife, I eat way too much meat. So what can we do to work on this? And I love steak, but if I find it on sale and I buy some, she cooks it and then cuts it up in little pieces and makes steak soup. There was a Tippin's, a restaurant, used to be here in Kansas City, where they made these wonderful pies, but they also sold something called steak soup. And when I tasted it, I said, wow, that's really good. So I said to my wife, why don't we do that at home? So take the steak and cut it up into little pieces and make soup out of it. And then what do you put in the soup to go along with the steak? Broth,
like
potatoes, vegetables, and all of a sudden you've got your whole meal, and you're not eating near as much steak, but you're enjoying the taste of it. 2 ounces of meat, fish, or chicken. Everybody tells me that I should be eating fish, and it just doesn't seem to work for me. When I eat fish, my wife will cook fish for dinner, and I'll eat it, and in 15 minutes, I'm hungry. Fish just doesn't seem to fill me up. So I'm a beef and chicken kind of guy. Pork too, but, well, ham and bacon and beef and chicken. But when you eat chicken, what would be better, to eat baked chicken or fried chicken? Baked chicken
tastes better.
The fried chicken tastes better. All that grease just tastes so good. It's like, well, let's try to eat a little healthy. And then some more vegetables. Pasta, rice, or potatoes, and some more vegetables. Okay, that's enough of that. What did I do? So, children need proper nutrition because they're to fuel the rapid growth, it says on page 228. They need a healthy diet, and they need whole wheat bread, and they need vegetables. And I'm glad that the schools are changing the cafeteria programs to try to teach kids to eat healthier. And in some places it's working because people are working harder at it. In other places it isn't working. But keep in mind, some of those cafeteria workers who are complaining about the kids throwing away all the healthy food and this program just isn't working, some of them weren't eating very healthy themselves. We do need to make some changes in the world we live in, and part of it has to do with the way we eat and the way we feed ourselves. It's just kind of a tragedy as to what we're doing to our health in terms of the way we eat today in America. Page 229, even though here America is supposedly overfed, and the word is they use out there obese, page 229 says there's still a lot of malnutrition where children aren't getting the proper food. I told you the story, didn't I? Or did I tell you the story about being in the grocery store, standing in line, here's a guy checking out with a gallon of milk and a 6-pack of beer, and he didn't have the money to pay for both. So which one did he pay for? Which one should he have paid for? The milk, and put the beer back. He paid for the beer and put the milk back. And if I would have thought quick enough, I would have said, hey, wait, let me buy the milk for your children, and gave him some money to buy the milk. But I didn't think fast enough. I just was in shock that he would do that. And part of the malnutrition, now some of the malnutrition in our society is because people can't afford to buy the food. But are there places where you can go and get food? Do any of you know about food pantries and about the food services in town where there are places where you can go that companies donate food and you can go there and pick it up to help feed your kids? So some kids really are coming from homes where they don't have the money to buy food. But I'll be the first to tell you, when I see somebody who says they can't afford to buy healthy food for their children, but they have a cell phone and they're smoking cigarettes, I'm thinking, what does a cell phone cost?
It's free.
A lot more than groceries.
A lot more than groceries. And what do cigarettes cost?
Nominated free.
A lot more than groceries. So I'm thinking that there's a lot of children who are not being fed properly because the adults in their world just simply don't want to make the sacrifices to feed them well. That they're too busy indulging their appetites for other things that aren't very healthy. It says it on page 229, 12 million Americans do not have food or money to buy food. And it happens that if you take the population of America and divide 12 million by the 350 million people live in our United States, it comes out to about 3% of the population. And if only 3% of the people in our country are basically suffering from malnutrition because they don't have enough money to buy food, would it be a burden? Would it really be a burden for the other 97% of the people to cough up enough money to buy food for that 3%? Would that really put a crimp in any of our spending styles if the government said we're going to take, along with taxes, to keep the roads going and the lights on and provide police and fire protection, we're going to take some of your money to provide money to buy food for these children, for these 12 million people who don't have it? Is that really going to take very much out of anybody's paycheck? I don't think so. Here's part of the problem. There are 12 million children out there who don't have food or money to buy food. So the government starts a program to give them little cards where they can buy food, and then they issue those cards to the parents so they can buy food for the children. Then do all the parents use those cards to buy food for the children, or do they use those cards to buy extravagant foods for themselves, or sometimes to buy foods that they actually sell to somebody else to get the money to spend something else on? And then the other problem is, and that's a small problem, I think I can live with some of that. The stores could stop a lot of that if they just wanted to. But the other problem is, you've got 3% of the people who really are hungry and need this, and then somebody comes here and says, hey, guess what? There's a program that you can cash in on with the government. Even if you don't need the money, you can go get the money if you just lie a little bit when you fill out the forms and start collecting money from the government. And I'm thinking, when you're collecting money from the government, just for the fun of it, you're taking it out of our pockets. Now, if it's going out of my pocket to take care of the poor and needy people, I say, good, let's do it. There's nothing wrong with the system that takes care of that. Let's use that to help take care of some of these people who are going hungry. But for people who take advantage of the system, then I'm saying, sorry, somebody ought to rat you out. I mean, I used to tell junior high kids when I go shopping, if I see a kid stealing something, I go up to the manager and say, that young man over there, he just took a CD and put it in his coat pocket, and I thought you'd want to know about it. And you know what the junior high kids called me for doing that? Any idea what name my junior high students gave me when I told them I ratted somebody out for stealing at the store? They called me a narc. Is that what they call people today? Who rat you out, who turn you in for stealing? But see, here's what I was thinking. The guy who's stealing stuff, the reason they charge me so much for CDs is they have to pay for the ones that are stolen. So I'm thinking somebody's stealing something. Wait a minute, you're stealing from me. The store owner's going to pass the cost of covering theft on to the people who are paying regular price. So I'm thinking if all of us would rat out all the thieves in the world. I mean, I had a guy say to me one time, he said, hey, I got a friend down the street who's selling steaks for about $1 a pound. And I just said to him, are those steaks from that semi-trailer that was hijacked out on I-70? When the truck driver was in eating dinner, someone took his truck loaded with steaks and brought them to town and started selling them to people out of the back of the truck. He says, I don't know. I'm thinking, well, think about it. If they're $1 a pound for steak, what do you think? Did he raise a cow and butcher it to sell it, or did he steal it? I'm not interested in buying stolen property. And if everybody would turn the guy down, if the thief couldn't sell the steaks he sold, he can't possibly eat them fast enough before they spoil. It's like he would probably change his way of life if we just made it more uncomfortable for a guy to be a thief. Okay, let's get back to students growing. Guess what happens if they don't get fed properly? It stunts their growth. What does that mean? It lowers their intelligence. And it causes them to perform poorly in school. So I'm thinking that we have a vested interest in our society in feeding these little children and keeping them healthy so that we can have grown-ups who function well in society. Page 231 talks about experience-dependent skills, skills that are learned from cultural experiences. Do you have any skills that you've learned from cultural experiences? I grew up in the country on a farm, and if I wanted to go across the road, I just walked across the road. I mean, if there was a car coming down the road, they would be going 30 or 40 miles an hour, and you would even see the dust flying over the dirt roads. You didn't have to look both ways before you crossed the street. What happens if you grow up in town and you decide to go from one side of the street to the other? Were any of you taught what to do? That's what they mean by experience-dependent learning. Were you told to, I remember raising little girls in the city, and what would we say to them before you cross the street? Do what? Look both ways before you cross the street. Now, have any of you figured out that you don't necessarily have to look both ways? You can just kind of listen for cars and glance out of the corner of your eye? Okay, what happens if you cross the street by listening for cars in this day and age? Have any of you almost been run over by one of these new electric cars? I couldn't believe it. I came out of the administration building one day and crossed the street, and somebody honked, and I'm going, what is this? And I didn't even hear them. And I looked up when they went by, and they were driving one of those little electric cars. You can't hear those things coming. They'll hit you. So you better, based on our culture, you better learn to look both ways carefully before you cross the street. Have any of you ever been driving your car and started to change lanes, and because you looked in your mirror and didn't see anybody, and then as soon as you started to change lanes, somebody honked, and you pulled back over and they were right there beside you, coming around you? And then you say to your friend, they came out of nowhere. No, the car didn't just materialize and come out of nowhere. Does anyone know where that car was? He was in your what?
Blind spot.
Your blind spot. He was in your blind spot. You all have a blind spot. So knowing you have one, you say, I have to turn and look real hard. If I don't look real hard, the guy could be in my blind spot and I could run into him. Children, it says on page 232, deprived of adequate stimulation, fail to reach their full cognitive potential. So that means I'm going to give my children, my 3 to 6 year olds, a lot of experience dependent kind of learning, where we're going to learn things by doing things. And I'm going to help them along the way, but we're going to give them a lot of learning experiences. An enriched environment includes toys, books. Did all of you have toys growing up? Books? Did you have books growing up? Did you have singing growing up? Good. For the rest of you, say, okay, no, then start finding toys and finding books and learning to sing together. Did you have hugs growing up? Did all of you have hugs growing up? Somebody says, no, who needs hugs? And what's the answer to that question? We all do. Little children need to be taught how to hug somebody. Running and jumping and climbing, oh no. Just seeing little 3 to 6 year olds running and jumping and climbing makes me nervous. I'm just sure they're going to fall and hurt themselves. Or they're going to run into something and break something. It's like, you know, Tom, that's just what happens. Have you noticed old people just get real nervous around little kids? It's like, don't you remember? That's what they need. So somehow we need to remind ourselves that they need to do this running and jumping and climbing. They need to be active. And I put something here too. They also need to hear adult voices. But not adult voices yelling at each other, adult voices carrying on conversations. I remember when our children were from 3 to 6, we'd have company over and it would get late. We'd say, girls, it's time to get ready for bed. And they would say, do we have to go to bed right away? I said, no, just get your pajamas on. And so they would go upstairs and get ready for bed. Then they would come back down and they would sit on the stairway right above where all the people visiting with us could see them. And they would just sit there and listen to the adult conversations. I asked them one time, why? And they said, it's just fun to listen, Dad. I said, okay. So I thought, why not let them do it? And one day, some friend of ours said, did you know your children are on the stairway listening to our conversation? And I said, yes. Were you going to say something that children shouldn't hear? And this person said, no. I said, well, there you go. I mean, how do little kids learn how adults talk to each other? By listening to adults talk to each other. And if they hear us always arguing, then that's not healthy. And I mean, and it just breaks my heart for these little kids today, because a little 3 to 6 year old who's watching, I am so glad today is the day we stop having political ads on TV. Don't they just wear you out? I mean, it's just like, just hateful talk, just saying mean things about. Were any of you raised with this little axiom? If you can't say something nice about someone,
Don't say anything.
don't say anything at all. I mean, wouldn't that be a great way to learn to live? If you can't say something nice about someone, just don't talk about it. And it seems like in this election, all both parties are doing are just saying ugly things about the person they're opposed to. And it's like, just tell me what you're going to do for me if I elect you. But somehow, all of this hateful talk has caught on in our society. And I feel sorry for children and for teachers of little kids, because they hear the adults doing that. And what happens? They come to school and talk mean like that to each other. It's like we've forgotten how to be a civilized society. What is happening to us that we talk in such hateful ways to each other? Okay. I put down for an enriched environment, toys, books, voices, reading, singing, hugs, cuddles, tickles. Did you ever get tickled? Running, jumping, climbing. Can you think of some other things we ought to put on the list that are an enriched environment for 3 to 6 year olds? I've got some things written down here. that have been mentioned in the past. Did I leave something out? You want to add something to the list? Let me give you one thing somebody added one time. Veggie Tales? Veggie Tales? No wonder they don't want to eat vegetables. Their vegetables are out there entertaining them. No, you're right. Veggie Tales are kind of funny. I even like to watch them. Anything else?
Did you say reading story?
Reading stories and reading books and just reading anything. Someone else mentioned this in a class one time. What about interaction with nature? Going out and interacting with nature. Just going out there and do any of you remember having parents who would rake leaves and then you would go jump in a big pile of leaves? Ugh. Why would my little kids want to do that? I don't know, but they're having a good time. I just rake these up. Don't mess them up. No, let them have some interaction with nature. And I'm thinking of one of my grandsons who loved to climb trees when he was little. And he would go way up high. And I said, buddy, if you fall, something's going to break. Be careful up there. Don't step on a limb that can break. And then after, when someone mentioned interacting with nature, I thought, oh, like hunting and fishing and gardening. Have you ever planted a garden? Was it fun to watch things grow? You say, I don't know. My garden just withered up and died. Well, what? You didn't put enough water on it? Didn't plant it where it got enough sun? But you understand? There's so many things we can do to enrich a child's environment. Can you have a garden in town? Right in the heart of... If you lived in New York City in an apartment, could you have a garden? Where would you put your garden? On the patio? Right outside your apartment? What kind of garden would you have? It would be a garden with planters. One planter would have what? Tomatoes on a stake. Another planter would be hanging from the overhang. What would it have growing out of it? What can you grow out of a hanging planter? That would be a garden variety thing to grow. Strawberries. Strawberries. Even if you only have a couple of things. Do something to enrich their environment. Page 234 talks about motor development. Do some little kids, while they're learning to run so... Have you ever watched a little kid, you say, I can tell this little kid is running so fast, especially if he gets out here and he starts running down a hill. You know he's running so fast that his body is going to start moving down the hill faster than his feet will, and what's going to happen? He's going to fall and roll down the hill. Now see, if I started running down that hill and my momentum carried me beyond what my feet would move, and I fell and rolled down the hill, something would probably break, and I would be bruised up and be a mess for about a week or two. What happens when the little kid, the little 3 to 6 year old, rolls down the hill? He pops up and laughs and runs back up the hill and says, let's do that again. And I'm thinking, whoa, what's going on? And to me, that's the beauty of the way God created these little chippers. He's made them so resilient. Don't get so worked up when that happens. I mean, I've watched my grandsons. Have any of you gone up here to this hill when it snows in the wintertime and watched the neighborhood kids slide down that hill on the other side of Blue River Bible Church up there?
I used to do that.
I've heard people call it Suicide Hill. And I took my grandchildren up there one day and I watched them go down that hill. I thought, now I know why they call it Suicide Hill. Because it just bump, and they hit that first bump and fly through the air and come down. And I thought, oh no, I better drive around to the bottom of the hill and pick them up and go get some hot chocolate and tell them let's go home and rest. What did they do? They popped up at the bottom of the hill and come running back up, want to do it again. If I got on a sled and did that, they would be carrying me off on a stretcher. It's the difference between being old and brittle and frail and being 3 to 6 years old where you can handle that kind of stuff. Except the 3 to 6 year old can't handle a 250-pound adult on the sled behind them, increasing the momentum and then crushing them when they get to the bottom of the hill. So let the little kids, let their own weight be the momentum. Don't put yourself on there with them and mess them up. So they're learning to run, they're learning to walk, they're learning to climb, and when they're running, they're going to fall. When they're climbing, they're going to make a misstep. When they're pedaling on their bicycle, they're going to learn to crank pedals, and when they do, what? They're going to pedal too fast and their bicycle's going to fall down. They're going to learn to throw things. Do you ever play catch with a little kid? What's the first thing happens when they try to throw something? It just goes everywhere. And it's like, well, let's just keep back and forth till we figure this thing out. And after you learn to throw things, then you learn to catch things. I mean, I think throwing and catching is so important. When I'm at the thrift store looking for stuff for me, I always go over to the section where they sell baseball gloves and baseballs and softballs, and I just buy them when they're 50 cents a piece and take them home. So when little kids come over, I've got something for them to play with, to go out in the yard and to throw things and catch things. And I also buy soccer balls so they can do what? Besides throw and catch, they can kick. And then what else do you think I buy? Basketballs. Say, no, if you buy a basketball, you have to have a basketball goal. Would you believe this? I had a neighbor that had one of these basketball goals, you know, that has this big plastic thing on the bottom and you put water in it. A big windstorm came through and blew it over. And all it did when it blew it over was bend some of the supports for the backboard and turn the basketball goal into an oval. And he put it out by the trash because it was broken. Well, guess what old Tom the farmer fix-it man did? I went over there with my truck and picked up his basketball goal and took it home, took it apart and straightened out the pipes for the backboard. And I tried to straighten out the hoop. Once it was bent, it stayed that way. So I said to my wife, I'll just buy another one the next time I see one on sale at the thrift store. And sure enough, I picked one up. And now I've got a basketball goal. No, I have 2 basketball goals. No, I have 3 basketball goals at my house at different heights so little kids can go out there and shoot baskets and play around. It just seems to me like that little kids need someone to encourage them. And some little kid, I say to some little kid, I mean, can you see a little 5-year-old? I said, so you want to shoot baskets? And he goes, I can't shoot that high. I said, that's why we have the short one over here. Let's go over here. Let's try it. And he throws it up there and he throws it up there. And he says, I can't do it. I said, no, what you mean is you haven't tried it enough yet. And so I just keep throwing it up there underhanded and messing around. And I don't even intend for it to go in. And I kind of want the little 5-year-old to see that I had to throw it about 12 or 15 times for it to go in once. So he'd be encouraged to try that. Because what happens after you throw a basketball at a goal about 12 times and then it finally goes through? You've never had that feeling?
You feel better about
I mean, the more you miss before it goes through the hoop, the better you feel about it going through the hoop. There's something about that sense of achievement after all of these misses. I got one that worked, and I'm just telling you, somebody needs to help little kids. To me, that's part of enriching their environment. Someone needs to help these little kids develop their motor skills, but by doing it, we're helping them learn some life skills as well. And then when it comes to their fine motor skills, putting on their shoes, buttoning their shirts, washing their hands and face, brushing their teeth, pouring drinks, using a spoon, lacing up their shoes. I don't care for lacing up shoes. I just never have. So for these shoes, I don't have any choice about it. I have to lace them up and tie them. But for tennis shoes, you don't have to keep lacing up your tennis shoes. if you buy the kind where you can just tie them once and slip them on, it will kind of mess up the heel a little bit, but then you don't have to tie it every time. Just because I'm kind of lazy in that regard. Tying things, using zippers, pencils, scissors, and other tools. What happens when little kids first use a pencil? I just can't believe the adults in the world I live in. Oh no, Johnny. What? You broke the lead. So what do you do when you break the lead on a pencil? You take a pencil sharpener and you sharpen it. Oh no, Johnny, you broke the lead again. Well, the guy's learning, but you understand why the little guy is pretty well ready to give up penciling? Because he's being kind of like he did something wrong. I mean, he's going to break the lead when he's learning how to first write. By the way, if you want a little kid to learn to use a pencil where he won't break the lead, have any of you ever seen a carpenter's pencil? It's like flat, got a big old chunk of lead in it. It's hard for a little kid to break the lead in a carpenter's pencil, so maybe let them use a carpenter's pencil at first so they're learning a little bit about their fine motor skills and how to do it, and then you start giving them pencils with the lead sharpened. Or just take the pencil and once it's sharpened, wear it down so it's not so easy to break it. And it's just a pencil, buy a whole box of them, buy 2 boxes of them. If you wear the pencil out, sharpen it, then just keep buying pencils because you're trying to help this little kid learn to develop his fine motor skills. And what's it take to learn these skills? Using scissors. Today, you've got to be careful about scissors. Adult scissors are so sharp that have you ever done this? Just touch the blade on the scissors and it cuts your hand a little bit. They are so sharp. Make sure you buy children's scissors for little kids because they're not that sharp. If they touch the blade, it won't cut them because some of these scissors are just as sharp as or sharper than knives. So be careful with what kind of scissors you give them. But let them learn how to use these things and teach them how to use them. And then when you're cutting things out, if we colored a picture and then we're cutting it out just for fun, and the little kid I'm working with, he goes, "Oh no." I go, "What happened?" He said, "I cut his arm off." I'm going, "It's okay, we can tape it back." And so I tape it back and he keeps cutting. And then if he's so distraught about cutting his little arm off on this little thing he drew, then I'm thinking, "Oh no." And he goes, "What happened?" I said, "I just cut his head off." I mean, I'll deliberately make a mistake. He goes, "You did?" I said, "Yes, but we can tape it back on." I mean, sometimes with little kids, I deliberately make a mistake so they're not so traumatized by making a mistake. Oh, and guess what some of the little kids will do? "Poppy made a mistake. Poppy cut the head off of his. Poppy colored outside the lines." And it's just like, hey, I'm bigger than that. I'm trying to teach these kids how to do something, so I'm going to let them know that mistakes are not the end of the world. You learn from your mistakes. Page 238 says health officials recommend 60 minutes of daily exercise. 60 minutes of daily physical activity for children. That's an hour. So, did any of you get an hour of physical activity when you were younger?
Recess.
Every day?
Recess.
What?
Recess.
How long was recess?
30 minutes. I don't know, but we had multiple recess.
If recess is 30 minutes long, you would need 2 of them. If it's 15 minutes long, you would need 4 of them. Where did you get an hour's worth of physical activity when you were younger?
My mom would kick us outside.
Your mom would do what?
She'd kick us outside
And just stand out there and let you play? And was that cool or what? Did your friends think, "I wish I lived at your house and I could go outside and play like that"? My mom doesn't want to go out there. It's cold outside. How'd you get yours, Jax?
I was kicked outside.
You were what?
I was kicked outside.
Kicked outside. They just said, "Hey, you're going to go outside and play." You need You need that exercise. And whatever recess we have at school, if it doesn't come to an hour, then when you come home, you're going to be outside running around for an hour. Doing something.
I was always outside. Like, I don't remember being inside very much.
And I'm just telling you that today, I mean, what's the first thing a lot of little kids want to do when they get home from school?
Play on technology.
They want to play on their computers. And I'm not against them doing that, but if you play on your computer for an hour and only get 15 minutes of physical activity, you are not going to be a healthy person. You need to play on your computer for 15 minutes and get an hour of physical activity. I kind of wish people would say to their children, as much time as you spend on the computer, you'll spend as much time out running around the house. And I don't know how this appeals to some of you, but I had a grandchild who I got her a little shovel, and she thought it was so cool. She loved digging holes with her shovel. So she would just go out in the yard and start digging a hole. And she would just dig and dig, and I said, "What are you doing?" She goes, "I'm digging a hole." And I say, "What are you going to do with it?" And she goes, "I don't know." It didn't matter. She just enjoyed using the shovel. And I would have to mow around it because it got to be a pretty big hole. But I thought, let her dig a hole. And then after she's lost interest in that one and she starts digging another one someplace else, I can fill that one in. It's like, no, you can't do that to our yard. I mow there. That'll mess up my mowing. Just give them a shovel and let them dig a hole. And then dig another one and let them build things. Get wood. Give them some nails and a hammer and let them start nailing wood together. I go to Home Depot, to the back of the store where they sell the wood for 10 cents on the dollar that's been damaged. And I take it home and cut it up in pieces so my grandchildren can just make things. And I don't care what they make. And sometimes they make something, get it half there, and then they quit. But at least they spent an hour outside working on this stuff and being active. Just get them out there and give them some activity. On page 239, it talks about a federal law that requires schools to provide services to children with disabilities. The Individuals Disability Education Act, IDEA. One time I had a family whose son was legally blind. He could just barely see. I mean, he got down like that. When I played chess with him, he would get down like this to see where the pieces were on the chessboard. And he was enrolled in a nearby school district, and the school district said they couldn't help. They didn't have the, here's what they said: "We don't have the resources to help your child. You probably should put him in private school." And I said, you need to go back to that school and mention that you read over the weekend about public law, whatever. It has a number to it, and I gave him the number of the public law that says legally every school has to provide for these children. So the father went to the school the next week and told them that he just learned about a public law that required them to provide services for his child. And as soon as he quoted that public law, guess what they said? "We will get right on that." And they bought a very expensive machine so it would magnify his textbooks so they were making provisions for his disability. And to me, this is sad. Okay, why did the parent have to quote the public law to get the public school officials to do the right thing? Because they didn't want to spend the money. So you need to help people understand their legal rights, and I'm thankful that our society says public schools have to provide the additional help that children with disabilities need. Page 246 and 247 talks about the effects of abuse on children. Any idea how a child being abused would affect that child? A child who gets slapped around a lot, what would he tend to do as he gets older? be violent and slap other people around. A child who's ridiculed and made fun of, what will he do as he gets older? Ridicule and make fun of other people. And what's really sad is some of the children who suffer abuse when they're younger just assume that this is the way life is, and when they grow up and have children, they do the same thing without even thinking about it. It isn't like I'm just going to be mean to my kids. It's just like, this is what was done to me, so this is what I do to my kids. They don't even think about it. It's just so sad. So make sure. That's why caregivers are told legally, especially teachers, that if you suspect child abuse, you need to turn it in, because it can do all kinds of sad things to these little children. And neglect, I'm just amazed. I mean, we used to have a little girl that lived across the street from us, and she would come home from school in the wintertime, and she'd walk up to the front door, and I'd watch her. She'd knock on the door, and nobody was there, so she would walk around the house. And I thought she was going around the house to go in the back door, but I found out by driving around the block that she was sitting on the back stoop waiting for her mother to get home. And I called family services and said, we've got a problem here. We've got a little child getting off the bus, coming home, and nobody's there to let him in the house. Now, what do some parents do so the kid can get in the house? What kind of necklace do they wear?
Key.
A necklace with the key to the house on it? But this mother didn't want somebody stealing a house key and breaking into her house while she was gone. So she just told her little girl to go around back and wait till I get there after work in the dead of winter. Nope. That's not going to happen. And in fact, when the police came, I told them, I said, look, you can tell that lady that there's an old couple across the street who will be more than happy to let the little girl wait at their house till you get home from work. I mean, and I'm thinking, if it wouldn't have been us, there's plenty of neighbors who would have said, that little girl can wait at my house till you get home. Don't tell a little kid to go sit in the cold and wait till I show up and hide so nobody sees you. That is just sad. And does this surprise you? Children who have suffered from neglect fall behind in school. They have delayed language development. They become withdrawn and develop poor impulse control. It's just, it's so important to make sure that these little kids are getting the help they need to grow. Chapter 8 talks about cognitive development of 3 to 6 year olds. As on page 257 it talks about it. It says that they start out, I mentioned already, with about 200 words at the age of 2, and then by the time they get to 6 years they know about 10,000 words. Oh, look at page 257. What are those boys dressed up like? What is that? Does anyone know what they're dressed up like?
Superheroes.
Superheroes. I never saw a superhero dressed like that. Mine was always wearing a red uniform with a S on the front of it. I never dressed up like Superman when I was a kid. We knew he was make-believe. But I did dress up like cowboys and Indians. And growing up in the country in Oklahoma, where Oklahoma is about half Native American and half European American, we often had a fight over who got to be the Indian. And the Indians didn't always lose when we played games. They were pretty smart people, the Indians that I knew. Okay, enough of that. Vocabulary. What does Piaget say on page 260 about how to help these children grow in their cognitive abilities? Have them do a lot of interactive things. Give them hands-on things to do. So let's see. What kind of interactive things could we do in the kitchen with 3 to 6 year olds?
Making cookies.
Making cookies. And do we let them mix some of the stuff together?
Sure.
Yes. And do we talk to them about how we pick the ingredients and what we use? And then do we let them scoop some of the stuff out and put it on the cooking sheet? And it's like, no, that's too much. I'm thinking, well, that's going to make a really big cookie. And then some little kid says, can I make a real big cookie? When they see how the stuff spreads out. And we say, no, we don't make cookies like that at our house. Why don't we say, yeah, make one real big cookie just to see what happens? And probably the real big cookie is going to be kind of doughy in the middle. We'd have to throw some of it away. It won't taste as good as the rest of them. But interactive, hands-on. What kind of curriculum materials? The stuff we're working with. They're developing schemas in their heads. They're assimilating new information. I mean, what's the primary ingredient in oatmeal raisin cookies? Oatmeal? Oatmeal and raisins? Okay, so here's some oatmeal that we're going to make cookies out of, and here's some raisins. Let's taste the raisins to see what they taste like that we're going to put in our cookies. Oh, those are good. Let's taste some oatmeal to see what it tastes like. Have any of you ever just put a little piece of raw oatmeal? Did it taste good? Well, not as good as an oatmeal raisin cookie. Because once you put it in the oven and work on it a little bit, it always seems to taste a little better. But don't you put some other stuff in it? Those of you who make oatmeal raisin cookies? I'm amazed at all the stuff we use flour for, but have any of you ever put some flour on your finger and tasted it? That's gross, isn't it?
Not unless it's coconut flour, which is just coconut.
Okay, so now you're trying a different kind of flour. Find some other stuff there. But it's just let the kids do some experimenting with this stuff, learning that something that maybe doesn't taste good on its own will taste good when it's cooked. Disequilibrium, throwing them off balance, coming back and regaining their equilibrium. What did on page 265 Vygotsky tell us about how we can help 3 to 6 year olds develop their mental abilities? Give them challenging materials. Give them something challenging to do. Well, like we just talked about, take them in the kitchen, let's make some oatmeal raisin cookies. Okay, so let's get the oatmeal out. Oh, we don't have any? Then let's go to the store and buy some. Now, and see, the idea here is that we give them a challenging thing to do, but we help them master it. I still remember the first time I took one of my little grandkids to the store. I wanted to see how young they could do some of this stuff. So I said, okay, let's go find some oatmeal. Let's go find some stuff to make this. And then let's go up and pay for it. And I'd say, here, I'll stand behind you. Here's the money. You can pay for it. And sometimes they would say, no, Bobby, I don't think I can do that. Or they'd say, I don't want to. And I'd say, okay, I mean, I'm not going to push it, but give them a chance to try some of that. One time I was in Russia with 2 of my grandchildren, and we were leaving school to go home, and my daughter said, take the kids home and warm up some soup for supper or something. And I'm walking down the street with them, and I look across the street and see a sign that was a McDonald's Golden Arches in Moscow, Russia. And I go, whoa, would you guys like to go home and warm up soup, or would you rather go to McDonald's? What do you think they said? McDonald's. So we crossed the street and walked up to McDonald's. We stepped in. Any idea what my problem was when I stepped into a McDonald's in Russia? The menu wasn't in English. And I said, children, do you know how to read Russian? And they go, well, I know some of those words, but not all of them. And I said, well, I don't know any of them. So it looks like you kids are going to have to order the food. And they go, I don't think I want to. I said, okay, then let's go home and eat soup. And we started, they said, wait a minute, Poppy, wait a minute. I'll go up and order it. And I said, what are we going to order? And they said, can we have a hamburger? And I said, so which one up there is a hamburger? And they said, I don't know a lot of those words. I said, well, start saying them out loud. Just repeat what you know. And they're coming across the menu and they go, Gamburger. Now, what do you think Gamburger probably is? If it isn't a hamburger, it's close enough to it. So I said, order 3 of those. And here's some money to go pay for it. And so he orders those 3 Gamburgers, and the lady behind the counter looks at me and smiles, and she thinks it's so great that I'm teaching this little kid to order his own food. He comes back and we sit down, we're eating. He says, Poppy, can I have some French fries? And I said, if you know how to order them, you can. And we never did figure out what the Russian word was for French fries, because it wasn't anything close to French fries. It's some crazy word, kind of like in France, they don't call them potatoes, they call them
The pommes frites. I think it's
des pommes
frites. I think
des pommes frites, fruit of the earth.
it's yeah.
That's the translation, isn't it? The fruit.
Apple means potato of the earth. In French, that's the way it's said. So like, fries might have something like
Yeah, it's just like, come on. So they didn't get any French fries, but we got hamburgers, so that was good enough, and we just kept going. But give them a challenging thing to do, and then help them do it. Scaffolding is something Vygotsky talks about, where you do part of the task for them, you help them do part of it, you simplify the difficult part. If a little kid is trying to draw something and they say, I can't do this, you say, here, let me help you. Just take their hand and hold the pencil and use. I said, now you're doing it. And they said, no, you're doing it. I said, no, we're both doing it. You understand that Vygotsky's point was, you give them something that stretches them a little bit, but then you help them succeed. And the more children succeed, the better they feel about themselves and about their abilities to do things. Take difficult tasks and break it down into little simpler tasks, and then talk them through the process. And teach them how to work together to do things. When they want to go out and build stuff out of wood, I'm going, you can do the hammering and the nailing, and you can put in screws with the drill. But my wife says, Nani says, do not let the grandchildren use the skill saw. You know, the thing that you pull the trigger and the blade goes around and can cut off your hand in a heartbeat or your finger or whatever. I'm going, good idea. So they say, can I do that, Poppy? I said, nope. Now, I did decide, since they wanted to saw so bad, I could get a hand saw and teach them how to use it. But hand saws are dangerous too if you get too close to it. But you know what I discovered? My grandchildren only had to push a handsaw about 3 or 4 times before they said, this isn't any fun. Can we use the saw with a button on it? And it's like, nope. So then they said, I don't want to do this. I said, then I will. And then I would stand there and just saw the rest of the board through with a handsaw, because I want them to see that there is another way to do it, and it's okay to work hard once in a while at doing something. Page 270 talks about the information processing approach, where we're teaching children to process things efficiently, speed and accuracy when processing. Do you all know your addition facts? What did you learn? What? The 2 family? 1 plus 2 is 3. 2 plus 2 is
4.
only one of you know your 2 family. 2 plus 3 is, let's all say it together on the count of 3. 3 plus 3 is
6.
There you go. 3 plus 4 is
7.
3 plus 5 is
8.
3 plus 6 is
9.
3 plus 14 is I only learned my facts up. I only learned my families up through 10. And I used to like to drive around with my little kids when they started learning math. And I'm going, let's see, 2 times 2 is what? 4. 2 times 4 is?
8.
Yeah, I've already lost you, haven't I? My little grandchildren can do better than that. 2 times 8 is?
16.
2 times 16 is?
32.
Oh boy. You people need to go back and review your math facts. 2 times 32 is?
64.
2 times 64 is? 2 times 128 is? 2 times 256 is? 2 times 512 is? Lost the whole group up.
Oh, I can't do it.
What?
I said I was following you.
Oh, you're there?
I was
I
good.
just didn't hear you, Jax.
My bad.
Okay. So you just say, you know what? And you're even smiling when I went beyond your capacity to do it. It's like, because it's kind of fun to do some of this stuff. So just have fun with things. You know what I like about singing? Do any of you have some favorite songs you sing? This little light of mine. What's the next phrase? I'm gonna let it shine. Okay, now let's come up with another verse. This little tract of mine, I'm gonna give it away. This little friend of mine, I'm going to invite them to church. You go, it doesn't rhyme, Poppy. I'm going, who said songs have to rhyme? Do they have to? I mean, it's more fun when they do. So, since they didn't like it when I made up songs that didn't rhyme, I start making up rhyming songs. I just think it's fun to take little kids and say, here's all the verses we have to it. Let's make up some more verses. Let's come up with some more. Let's just learn to think about this stuff and do it as fast as we can and as accurately as we can. Do any of you have any automaticity going on in your life? Automaticity.
Yes.
Do you go to the keyboard on the computer and do you look down at your fingers, or do you just start typing? Have you taken a keyboarding class where you just start? I mean, isn't it fun with a computer? You can actually be thinking of, like, this is the first day of the week, and your fingers just punch it out and it shows up on the screen. That's called automaticity. You don't think about which finger's hitting which key. You've just done it so often, it becomes an automatic thing to do. And I think it's beautiful that God gave us that capacity. And what's fun about you guys, see, when I learned keyboarding, it was on a typewriter with paper. So if you made a mistake, it was a big deal to try to fix it. With the computer, you just type away and then hit spell check, and it checks it for you. Yeah, but remember, if you say to, and you should have said T-O-O, and you typed T-W-O, spell check won't point that out to you. You have to do your own grammatical proofreading when you're doing this stuff. Okay, it's time to go. Okay, I'll make a mark here, and we'll start here with metacognition next time. Have a nice day.